The way Americans plan for retirement is about to break. Not in 5 years, not when something dramatic happens, right now while almost nobody is talking about it. And here's what most people don't realize. The rules everyone is using to plan for their retirement, the 4% rule, the retire at 65 assumption, the Social Security math, the healthcare projections, all of that was built for a world that no longer exists. And the people who built their plan on those rules are walking towards a finish line that just seems to keep moving further and further away from them. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 6 shifts that are reshaping retirement right now. By the end, you're going to see your plan a little bit differently, and you'll know what needs to change before these shifts catch up to you. I'm Tyler Batts, I'm a financial planner, and I watch this stuff every day. Let's get into it. And real quick, if you want someone to walk through how these shifts affect your plan, that's the work we do at Riverbend. There's a link in the description below to book a free discovery meeting. All right, here's the first shift. Retirements are getting longer than anyone planned for. And here's a fact that should change how everyone thinks about retirement. According to the Social Security's life expectancy data, a 65-year-old man could expect to live about 18 more years on average, and a 65-year-old woman about 20 more years. That means the average 65-year-old is not planning for a short retirement. And for married couples, the planning issue gets even bigger because the plan has to account for one spouse living much longer than the other. And over time, those numbers have generally been climbing. The 4% rule, the rule almost every retirement plan has been built around, was designed for a 30-year retirement. You retire at 65, plan for your money to last to 95, and that's been a standard that people have used as a baseline for decades. But if you and your spouse are both 65 today, there is a real chance one of you needs that money to last to 95, 97, or maybe even 100. For a 65-year-old couple, there's a better than 50% chance at least one of you lives past 90, and about a 1 in 5 chance one of you reaches 95. So planning to 95 or 100 isn't out of the question, and for some couples, that could very much be their reality. So here's what happens when you stretch the 4% rule from 30 years to 35 or 40. The longer the withdrawal period, the less forgiving a fixed withdrawal rule becomes. So a rate that survived most 30-year historical periods can get a lot more fragile when you stretch it to 35 or 40 years. The strategy that worked when retirements were shorter starts to break when retirement gets longer. What this means for your plan is simple. The rules of thumb that were good enough for your parents' retirement are not good enough for yours. You need a plan for a longer life than the rules assume. That changes the savings target. It changes the withdrawal rate, and it changes when you claim Social Security. It changes just about everything. But most people are still planning for a retirement that ends at 90. The reality is it might not. It might go all the way to 100. The plan needs to catch up. Shift number 2 is healthcare costs are about to outpace your savings strategy. One of the biggest shifts happening in retirement right now is healthcare costs. Most people still think about retirement spending through the lens of general inflation, but healthcare does not inflate at the same rate as everything else. And over a 30 or a 40-year retirement, that gap matters. According to Fidelity, the average 65-year-old couple retiring today may spend roughly $345,000 on healthcare throughout retirement. That number does not include long-term care. That's just Medicare premiums, prescriptions, and out-of-pocket costs. Now, here's the part many people underestimate. Healthcare costs have historically risen faster than general inflation for long stretches of time. So if you're building a plan that's built on flat inflation for everything, there's a good chance you're understating future healthcare costs, especially later in retirement. And then there's long-term care. According to the Administration for Community Living, someone turning 65 today has almost a 70% chance of needing some type of long-term care during their remaining years. And the cost can be staggering. The national median for a private room in a nursing facility is now around $130,000 per year. And in many markets, it's a lot higher. 2 or 3 years of long-term care could completely reshape a plan that once looked solid on paper. And this is the shift many people haven't fully processed. Retirement isn't just getting more expensive because prices are rising. It's getting more expensive because people are living longer and healthcare costs tend to rise as we age. So what this means for your plan is simple. Healthcare needs its own category. Long-term care needs its own contingency plan, and healthcare inflation should probably be modeled differently than the inflation rate you use for everything else. because the plans that ignore this risk often work perfectly right up into the moment they don't. Shift number 3 is Social Security as you know it is changing within the decade. This year, the Social Security's trustees released their 2026 report, and the date moved. The retirement trust fund is now projected to be depleted in the fourth quarter of 2032. That's about 1 quarter earlier than last year's estimate. If Congress does nothing between now and then, incoming revenue would only be enough to pay about 78% of scheduled retirement benefits. Put a little bit differently, that's a projected shortfall of roughly 22%. That's not speculation. That's the math in the trustees' own report. Now, Congress is almost certainly going to do something. The question isn't whether Social Security disappears, it's what changes get made and who pays for them. Here's what a realistic fix could look like. The full retirement age might rise from 67 to 68 or 69. Benefits for higher income retirees might be means tested. The annual cost of living adjustment might be calculated differently, slowing benefit growth over time. Payroll taxes might go up, or maybe it's some combination of these that happen together. But historically, policymakers have been very reluctant to make abrupt changes for current retirees or people very close to retirement. But from a planning standpoint, it's still wise to stress test your benefit rather than just assuming the number on your statement's locked in. So if you're retiring in the 2030s or later, maybe you run a scenario where your benefit could be 10% to 20% lower than the projection shows you today. What this means for your plan is don't treat Social Security as a built-in fixed number. Build in some cushion. And if you're younger, don't lean on Social Security as your primary income. Treat it as a meaningful supplement to a plan that you've already built independently. The retirees who get hurt by this won't be the ones who saw it coming. They'll be the ones who treated Social Security like an unchangeable promise instead of what it could be, a moving target. Shift number 4, a generational wealth transfer, is about to reshape who gets help and who doesn't. Over the next couple of decades, roughly $124 trillion is expected to transfer from older generations to their children and grandchildren. That's the largest wealth transfer in history, and it's already happening, one inheritance at a time. And depending on which side of that transfer you're on, this changes your planning in very different ways. If you're a current retiree with significant savings, there is a good chance you leave behind more than you expected. In fact, many retirees underspend throughout the entire retirement because they're afraid of running out. And then they end up leaving behind more than they ever planned to. So the question isn't whether you'll leave a legacy, it's whether you'll leave it on purpose or whether your family simply receives whatever happens to be left at the end. Intentional legacy planning means deciding what matters now. How much do you want to leave behind? Who's it for? And what the purpose of the money is. And just as importantly, how much permission you give yourself to enjoy the money while you're alive. Because the retirees who tend to enjoy retirement the most are often the ones who get intentional about both spending and legacy, not the ones who hold on to everything out of anxiety and fear. Now, if you're on the other side of this, closer to receiving an inheritance someday, this matters for your planning too. A lot of people in their 50s and 60s may receive a meaningful inheritance over the next 10 to 20 years. Now, some families talk openly about this, but unfortunately most don't. And that silence creates planning problems for everyone. Now, you should never fully depend on an inheritance for your retirement security, but depending on the likelihood, the timing, and the size, it may still meaningfully shape your long-term plan. This is one of the biggest shifts happening in retirement right now. Retirement is becoming more multi-generational. And the plans that work best are usually the ones where parents and adult children are communicating with each other instead of avoiding the conversation. Quick reminder, if you want help thinking through any of this for your situation, that's what we do at Riverbend. There's a link in the description below. All right, shift number 5. Tax uncertainty is becoming a bigger retirement risk. The federal debt is now around $39 trillion and it is still rising. Social Security faces some long-term funding pressure, and Medicare costs keep climbing. And whether taxes rise through legislation, inflation, or future policy, it's hard to imagine rates staying exactly where they are forever. Maybe not next year, maybe not even 5 years from now, but over a 30 or 40-year retirement, assuming taxes never change, is probably not the best bet. Now, this matters because every dollar in a traditional IRA has a silent business partner attached to it. That's the IRS. The only question is what percentage they own in the future. Every withdrawal from a traditional IRA is taxed at whatever the rate is at that time you withdraw in that year. Higher rates, you keep less. Lower rates, you keep more. So the real question becomes, how do you plan for a future where tax rates are uncertain? The answer is flexibility. You want money spread across different tax buckets. Some pre-tax, some Roth, some taxable brokerage account. That way, whatever future policy looks like, you have options for where you're pulling income each year. And that flexibility becomes one of your most valuable assets in retirement. Now, I want to be careful about the conclusion. Higher future tax rates do not automatically mean everyone should go rush right now and convert everything to Roth today. Whether conversions make sense depends on your income, your balances, your projections, and the math behind your plan. What higher tax uncertainty does mean is that tax planning matters more than it used to. The retirees who build flexibility in tend to have more control later, because retirement tax planning is rarely about predicting the future perfectly. It's about making sure you have options no matter what the future looks like. Shift number 6, retirement age is becoming a meaningless number. The traditional model of retirement was simple. You picked a date, you stopped working forever, and you started living off your savings. That model is slowly disappearing. A growing number of retirees are doing some form of paid work after their first retirement. The U.S. Bureau of Labor states that over 38% of people 65 or older are working part-time. Now, some go back to work part-time in the original field, some consult, some start small businesses, some take seasonal jobs because they want structure or purpose or just some human interaction. But the point is, more and more retirees aren't choosing between working full-time and never working again. They're choosing some version in between. And a few things are driving this. People are living longer and they're staying healthier later. Longer retirements create more financial pressure. And honestly, a lot of people retire, they hit a wall of unstructured time, and they realize they still want meaningful work, just on different terms. And this changes retirement planning completely because income no longer has to come from only one source. You can plan for a bridge period where part-time work delays Social Security and takes pressure off your portfolio at the same time. You could plan for a second career that gives you purpose and income for another 5 to 10 years. You could plan for seasonal work that pays for travel without even touching your investments. All of these change the math in your favor. Working part-time at 65, even at a lower income than before, can let you delay Social Security to 70 and permanently raise your benefit. Every year you wait past your full retirement age adds about 8% to your monthly check, up to the age 70. It could give your portfolio more time to grow because you're waiting for withdrawals to begin, and it can create more flexibility around how and when you spend. The best retirement plans today often aren't built around a hard stop at 65. They're built around flexibility, not because everyone's going to use it, but because having the option changes the whole plan and how everything can be structured. Let's bring all this together. We see retirements are getting longer than the old rules assumed. Healthcare costs are rising faster than people realize. Social Security is facing some long-term pressure. We've got a historic wealth transfer that's reshaping how families think about legacy. Tax rates could likely change over the course of a long retirement, and the hard line between working and retiring is starting to disappear. Now, none of these are dramatic predictions. They're trends that are already happening, and they're changing the math of retirement whether people acknowledge it or not. The plans that work in this new environment are usually the ones that adapt to these shifts on purpose. The ones that struggle are built on assumptions from a world that no longer exists. Now, the good news, you don't need to overhaul everything. You just need to update the assumptions your plan is built on. Plan for a longer retirement. Build a healthcare contingency. Think carefully about how much you depend on Social Security. Be intentional about legacy. Build tax flexibility into your accounts and leave room for some version of phased retirement if life takes you that direction. Do those things and your plan becomes far more durable. Not because you predicted the future perfectly, but because you built a plan that was flexible enough to handle whatever the future becomes. Now, if all of this has you wondering whether your number is still going to be enough given everything that's changing, I made a video that walks through that right here. It shows you 3 numbers that fit your real life. Not a generic target like $2 million or 8 times your salary. If you want to update your retirement number based on what we just talked about, that's the video I'd watch next. I'll see you there.